But first, 5 Just Stop Oil activists were arrested last night after interrupting a performance of Les Miserables in London's West End. Footage shows the crowd at the Sondheim Theatre booing as the eco-warriors climbed onto the stage holding an orange banner during the famous protest song One Day More, and then fastening themselves to the stage using bicycle locks before the show was inevitably called off. It's the looks on the protesters' faces that say it all, those glorious expressions of self-satisfied moral superiority learned from the master of eco-posturing, Greta Thunberg. We know better than you, is what they were saying. Just Stop Oil said in a statement, 4 people are locked to the stage of the French Revolution-themed show. Valjean steals bread to feed a starving child. How long before we are all forced to steal? Now, as someone who is not a fan of Les Mis, I, for one, would have been thrilled to have the show cut short by protesters if I were there, even protesters as absurd as Just Stop Oil. But for those in the audience who had spent up to £200 a ticket, it was a ruined night. And for what purpose? The audience were left asking, what on earth has this got to do with us? Just like the crowds at football and cricket matches, the snooker spectators, the tourists visiting galleries or Madame Tussauds, or anyone just trying to drive their car to work in recent years, everyone is left asking, why are Just Stop Oil protesting here? What has it got to do with me going about my daily life? Just Stop Oil has told us why. They're demanding a total halt on licensing and consents for all future exploration, development and production of all fossil fuels in the UK. And they say they're going to continue protesting until that happens. One of the protesters last night, Hannah Taylor, issued a statement after the Les Mis protest saying, the show starts with Jean Valjean stealing a loaf of bread to feed his sister's starving child. How long before we are all forced to steal loaves of bread? How long before there are riots on the streets? The show cannot go on. We are facing catastrophe. New oil and gas means crop failure, starvation and death. It is an act of war on the global south and an utter betrayal of young people. Pull yourself together. Well, Hannah, I can help you answer some of those questions. How long before we're all forced to steal loaves of bread? Well, how long before there are riots on the streets? It depends on whether Just Stop Oil get their way or not. The continued use of fossil fuels is the reason why we have had enough food and hungry people aren't forced to riot in the streets. Your plan to get rid of fossil fuels will turn us back to the pre-industrial dark ages when people routinely starved to death because we didn't mass-produce cheap and plentiful food like we do now. And we are not, as you say, Hannah, facing catastrophe. None of the evidence points to anything remotely catastrophic about the global climate warming slightly. On the contrary, plant life and animals, including humans, have always flourished in warmer temperatures. And new oil and gas won't mean crop failure, starvation or death. Quite the opposite. They will mean plentiful energy supplies to feed us and enrich our lives in the West and help drag billions of people out of poverty in the developing world. Once again, the eco-cultists have sought to impose their quasi-religious extremism on the rest of us. And once again, yep, we're discussing Just Stop Oil. But we're not playing a game or playing their game. It's a good thing. I'm always happy to talk about their exploits because every time we do, more people get to see these protesters for what they really are. An ill-informed, authoritarian, hypocritical, doom-mongering eco-cult. And now millions of Brits, and even the Prime Minister, it seems, have woken up to exactly what abandoning fossil fuels will mean for ordinary people's lives. They just aren't going to buy this nonsense anymore. Just Stop Oil may have ruined a performance of Les Mis, but the only people who are going to end up miserable will be the eco-activists, because they're never going to get their way. Well, that's what I think. But what do you think? What do you make of Just Stop Oil's antics? Are they damaging their own cause with their actions? Or are they justified? Give me a call on 0344 499 1000, text on 87222, or you can tweet me on X at TalkTV. Well, we're going to talk to Russell Quirk in the studio in just a few moments to get his thoughts on what my next guest has to say, who is a member of Just Stop Oil. It's Fiona Atkinson joins me right now. Good afternoon to you, Fiona.
Hello, Julia.
Thank you so much for joining me. What was the point of ruining people's evening at the theatre last night? 200 quid a ticket, some people had paid. What was the point of that?
Well, I thought you might ask that, but I also wanted to just say I only came on today to see if you're still lying to your audience. And
Oh,
yeah, you
bless.
still are. Denying truth, denying what actually was in your own news broadcast. Do you watch your own news
I do watch my own
broadcast,
broadcast,
Julia?
but I don't actually have to agree with everything else that's
No,
broadcast because I think we should be allowed to have our own
yeah.
views based on the facts.
So the facts. So let's deal with the facts.
Could you answer? Could you just first answer the
No,
question I asked you, and then you can
No.
come on. We've got plenty of time. Answer the question I've asked you.
I'm glad we've got time, but just let me finish what I was saying
No,
about
I'd like you to answer the
news.
question I asked you, and then you can talk about that.
I will, Julia, but I just want to draw your audience's attention to the fact that you are denying your own news.
I'm denying my own news?
Yep.
What do you want me to do, faint?
You covered, well, you might.
What am I denying?
It is actually quite shocking that a presenter on a TV channel decides to ignore what was on their news. The wildfires in Tenerife, they're not true then. So
what do you mean not true? There are wildfires in Tenerife.
The hottest year, yeah, okay. And these are happening all over the world, aren't they?
Yeah.
All the time. And your viewers
They've been happening,
are watching that.
Happening for millennia.
And they're listening to you, misinform them.
What did I misinform them about?
This isn't happening. You're saying that there aren't crop failures. You've got
I didn't say there weren't crop failures. I didn't say that.
You gave a big reassuring spiel at the beginning, which was just full of lies.
Has food production in recent years gone up or down in the world?
Food production is being challenged everywhere by this weather.
Sorry,
India,
Fiona, are you going to answer any of the questions I've actually asked you? You're just going to answer something else?
No.
You're saying that we've got a problem with possible starvation. If we've got a problem because crop failures and everything's going to go horribly wrong, we're all going to be starving to death because of climate. Let me finish the question. Even if you're not going to answer it, let me finish it.
Well,
Fiona,
I'm quite happy to answer your
I asked you a really
question,
simple
but I was
question.
a bit shocked by your lies.
Has the amount of food produced in the world gone up or gone down in the last, say, 10 or 20 years? Up or down?
The amount of food that we,
it's gone up hugely.
The amount of food that we are able to produce on a planet that is covered by floods and wildfires. It's not covered by floods and wildfires. Our weathers. Well, I don't know what you've been watching, but
there have always been floods. There have always been wildfires, and there always will be.
For a presenter, you are horribly out of touch. I'd be ashamed if I was talking that crap and I was.
Oh, please don't use that language on air. Please, apologies to people listening at home.
Could you stop stirring me up to do that? You've got.
Oh, I'm sorry. So I'm responsible for you using bad language and for the end of the planet. That's a lot of responsibility for one afternoon.
You are responsible for misinforming your audience, and you are responsible for pretending that.
Has food production across the world gone up or down?
What Just Stop Oil is saying.
Has it gone up or down? It's gone up. Are there more people starving in the world or less people starving in the world now?
And
fewer. There are fewer people starving.
There are not fewer people starving. We've got crop failure all over the world.
I'm so sorry.
I don't know where you go for your information.
There are official bodies who compile these things. The amount of poverty, the amount of people who are living with hunger has absolutely plummeted. The percentage of people who die as a result of climate catastrophes or any natural disasters has gone down by 99% in the last 100 years.
We are facing crop failure all over the world. And here's the example.
Food production's gone up.
India is not going to export the usual amount of rice. We've got breadbasket failure all over the world. We've got farmers in Spain who are giving up on farming because the weather has become so unpredictable. We have a climate catastrophe so bad that the Pope is backing activists. The
Pope is backing you? Yeah, the Pope has.
We have to get on with this. Not only the Pope, though. Every single scientist, every single climate scientist that actually understands the facts is saying we are facing a climate breakdown so bad that millions will starve.
Fiona, that's factually untrue. Every single scientist and every single climate scientist
there's the odd one or two.
are not saying that. There are many saying quite the difference.
There's only the one.
Can you come back to my first question?
You look up.
I know you're not big on answering questions, Fiona.
No, I'll happily answer that question.
You had to say, first question, because it's not very nice for people to listen if we're just going to talk over each other. First question, what was the point of the protest last night?
The point of the protest last night was for us to get across to everybody the importance of rising up, and what a great play to get that message across, because it's going to take, as the Pope has said, ordinary people rising up and saying, enough, we need to make sure that our children are safe, and right now they're not safe. I don't know if you saw,
What do you mean they're not safe?
Well, did you see any? Good God, I'm beginning to wonder where you live. Did you watch any television this summer? Did you see the guy in his flip-flops?
I drove down a motorway in Sicily that was on fire on both sides. Yes.
Well, there you go. There you go.
Yeah.
An everyday event in your life, Julia.
Well,
and yet
actually, wildfires are pretty common in Sicily,
your dedication to denial is so impressive, because
I find your dedication to not answer the question a bit. You know,
I've just answered the question.
You said ordinary people are rising up, and I would agree with you. They are rising up, but they're rising up against eco protesters for disrupting their lives, and they're rising up. And we've had a bump in the polls for Rishi Sunak when he said we're going to push back. I mean, I think he should abandon the net zero targets, but he says we're going to push them back. 60% of people think we're not doing enough about the climate crisis. If this was a proper democracy, he wouldn't be reining back on net zero. What would be a proper democracy? He'd be moving forward on it. This democracy would recognise the fact that everybody across this country now accepts, except you, Julia, by the sound of it. I'm just the only one.
We do have a climate crisis, and that we do have to move faster on it.
I don't think the polling says that at all.
If we had a proper democracy, we'd stop paying 236 million in subsidies to the fossil fuel industry every week.
To keep the lights on and the engines running, and
we would be investing
how would
in
we
the
function without
renewables that would be
fuels?
saving. Hang on, if we invested properly that 236 million, if we were subsidising renewables, insulation, and getting on with making sure that our houses are fit for the 21st century. If we were investing that money, your audience would be saving money. That
would be great. Okay, but how would we function without fossil fuels? And when do you think, what year roughly do you think we can stop using fossil fuels?
We've got about 7 or 8 years to gradually give up on fossil fuels.
All fossil fuels?
Okay,
so just clarify, how are we going to make concrete and steel and get cars made, have cars function, trains, aeroplanes, factories built? How are we going to do all of that? How are we going to heat all of our homes?
We have about 7 or 8 years to move away from it.
7 or 8 years.
Start investing in what will get us out of this crisis. But Julia, there's no
Fiona, stop. Don't move on, Fiona. You said within 7 or 8 years, so basically by the end of this decade, you think we can move away, start moving away, or completely stop all use of fossil fuels?
We use what we've got. We've got about 7 or 8 years worth of oil and gas. We don't need any more.
So we need 2030,
to properly invest in renewables.
Right.
We need to get on with insulating our houses.
Okay, yeah, you said that. Yeah. But in 2030, you think that our country can function, we'll keep the lights on, heating on, making food, running factories, people being able to travel. You think that we're going to be able to do all of that on what, renewables? Or how about, are we allowed to have nuclear power?
There will be some need for gas and oil, even in that time.
So we are going to have... What's some need?
But we don't need any new oil and gas.
Okay, what is some need?
Julia, you need to listen to this bit. It's a death sentence. Okay. Have you got anybody you love in your life?
I don't know.
I
hate everybody, and I hate my children and my grandchildren in the future, and I want the world to die. I think that's the... Is that what you want me to say?
I'll tell you what, it sounds like you hate life, because if you actually loved life, you would want to protect it, and you'd
It's because I love life, and I love freedom, and I love living in a wealthy Western country where we have all these amazing world commerce that have improved our lives. And I want everyone in the developing world to have exactly what we've got. I want them to be getting as many fossil fuels as they can and living the fantastic rich life we have, and everyone going on a holiday where they want and driving a car where they want. I love it.
You sound like something from another age. It's about time you got with it.
I think it's about time you
understood reality. Your own news. Just watch your own news now and then.
Let's not go over that. Okay. Do you think that you are taking the country with you when you do protest? When you sort of, you stop a play at the West End, a football match, the snooker, people on their cars. Do you think you're really making it the right...
I think people increasingly understand that young people want some kind of future, and they're terrified.
And they won't have a future otherwise.
They need everybody listening to this programme. They need my friends, my family, your friends, your family to get into resistance against a government.
Resistance? What do you want people to do?
Failing to protect us. I'd like you to go to juststopoil.org and sign up and come on a slow march with us, Julia, because then that would show you've actually understood what's going on in the world that you present daily on this programme. At what point do you think your audience are going to turn around and say, why did you misinform us, Julia? Is it going to be the bit where the waves are going over their houses, where they can no longer insure their houses?
Okay.
Well, we're facing...
Do you realise that most of the things you say have no backing in any fact or reality or scientific paper?
Totally backed by science everywhere, by the Pope,
roughly by the Pope backs it. I mean, he's a well-known climate scientist, along with Greta.
Advisors, by scientists everywhere.
Well, just out of interest, I've had my basement ground floor flat flooded before. So can you give me some warning? When exactly are the waves going to flood over my house? Just so I know. I can write it down.
Flash floods could happen in London at any time.
Flash floods.
Yeah.
And waves going over the top of houses.
20,000. Do you think the 20,000 people who were washed into the sea in Libya ever thought that was going to happen to them, Julia? Do you think that? Do you think they realised that was coming for them?
That was because and you know why they didn't? Because of failure of infrastructure maintenance.
A failure of infrastructure, yes. Yeah. And
I don't know, that's what the people in Libya are saying. Maybe they know what they're talking about.
Just a little bit to do with 6 months of rain coming down in 24 hours. 6 months of rain in 24 hours, Julia. And that could happen here at any time.
Right. Well, watch out, everybody. Hold your loved ones close.
I would go and try and get your basement insured, Julia, now.
It is insured. But if the waves are going over the top of the house, there's no point, is there?
Tell your audience the truth so they're not confused by what's on the news and then listening to you.
I've got to end, but I don't want to cut you off, but I've got to end because we've got to go to another guest. Fiona Atkinson, it's been a joy.
Keep going with the truth, Julia. Try that for a change.
It's been a joy. At least I'm wearing the right colour.
JustStopOil.org, everyone.
Absolutely. Go to Just Stop Oil, everybody. Just Stop Oil. Thank you so much, Fiona Atkinson. Thank you. Thank you so much. It's been a joy. OK, Russell Crook. Your face has been the joy of A, that interview, and B, Russell Kirk's face throughout that.
Wow. OK, where to start?
I think she thinks it's your fault too.
Well, yeah. Well, I'm with you on this. Look, the fact that Fiona continually talks about the truth, and the only truth, she didn't come up with any facts, any statistics. She mentioned kind of scientists and the Pope in the same breath, and yeah, I don't think the Pope is a scientist either, frankly. But the fact that all she can cite as the reason that in the future we are going to have waves gushing over the tops of our houses in Islington or wherever is the fact that, or wherever, but is the fact that, you know, there's some wildfires, which there always are, and some floods, which there always are. There have always been what we call weather events, 100 years ago, 1,000 years ago.
Extreme weather events?
But I have looked at the stats very quickly. I have looked at the stats. There's absolutely no evidence whatsoever that there are any more wildfires or floods now than there were 1,000 years ago.
They're happening in sometimes different places, but there are...
Smooth it out, it's level. And most of these fires are caused by what? Arsonists.
That's, again, not you and me saying it, it's the local police saying it, indeed. Well, I'd love to get your reaction to that. Remember, you should stop listening to my lies, everybody. Well, Just Stop Oil were carrying out their reign of terror, some might say, this time over innocent theatregoers at Les Mis. Another group of activists were waging their own war in the capital, taking on the mayor's low-emission scheme. The balaclava-clad, self-titled Blade Runners are destroying London's ULEZ cameras. That's the ultra-low emission zone camera.